just the white Iowans. It's preoccupation that is bedeviling liberal white voters across the country. It has also paralyzed voters, racking them with indecision as they try to identify a candidate who can prevail across a range of voting blocks, including minority communities as well as suburban and working class voters. So, yeah, that's a very interesting thing. It's a very interesting dynamic and mindset that a lot of people, especially in Iowa, are leaning towards. I think it's a lot of people across the country, and you can see it. Say that black voters kind of do it as well. They say, well, what are the white voters going to think? Like, would they like this guy instead of just actually voting for the guy that they want or the girl that they want? What do you make of this mindset?
Well, I don't really understand. I don't really know if that article is true or if it represents enough of Iowan Democrats, honestly. Because why would Buttigieg be in first place in Iowa if they thought that they were backing a candidate that blacks would vote for?
Yeah, a coalition building guy with one demographic coalition doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It just seems like, again, it seems like it's, and I had a very interesting discussion with Ryan Grimm about this. I'm sure I mentioned this before. It's like Democrats, like, they're so scared of actually choosing someone who they want. Like, Republicans, they don't hesitate. Nobody thought that Donald Trump would be the cool guy. No one thought that the Republicans would want to choose Donald Trump, but Donald Trump was their kind of guilty pleasure, and they're like, yeah, we'll choose Donald Trump. But I mean, he can snuck out of nowhere. But with Democrats, it was like, how are we going to appeal to the Republicans? How are we going to appeal to other Democrats? How are we going to get the most people? Are we going to win? Like, they ask themselves all these questions. The Republicans, they just seem to go with the guy who they want, which I think is just such a more sensible strategy, at least in the way I would see kind of voting and things like that.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe Democrats overthink things, But I still think that people, if people develop a candidate who they prefer enough over another one, then that's the one they will usually go for, even if they think that maybe that person isn't the most electable. That's my gut feeling anyway. But I can see how torn they might be, because what they really are most concerned about is Donald Trump being president again. So I don't know. I guess the Democrats have a lot of good candidates, and I think that most Democrats would be happy if any one of them became the nominee. That's my feeling. So I just say, vote for who you like.
Yeah, I mean, do you get the sense that a lot of these people could beat Trump, or are some of the polling is not accurate, would you say?
Well, I think Biden has the best chance to beat Trump. But I think some of the other candidates could win too. I just think it would be a much more nerve-wracking election night.
Yeah.
Really, the entire election really hinges on those 3 or 4 states that turned the election for Trump last time. Mm-hmm. The rest of the country is pretty much not that exciting.
Kind of already set in stone.
Yeah. Somebody made an interesting comment the other day that I thought was really important. They were saying that Democrats who are running for president are putting all their energy into Iowa and New Hampshire to try to get some momentum. But Iowa and New Hampshire are not important states in the general election. It's states like Michigan and Pennsylvania and Ohio and Minnesota that are key. And Donald Trump is already campaigning in those states, but not a single Democratic candidate is doing that. And that was a little distressing to hear, Democrats aren't really going to be engaged in these really key states until much later in the campaign.
So you're kind of saying that these Rust Belt states that the Democrats struggle most with, they should be like kind of put up in importance in
Yeah,
the primary calendar.
they should probably be visiting them now.
Yeah, and then that makes sense. If they make the most connections with them with those states in the primaries, I think they're more likely to kind of come out and vote. It's definitely interesting. I think political theory there.
And it was the mistake that Hillary Clinton made. She didn't visit those states enough, and she lost them. She thought she had them in the bag, and she didn't.
Yep. That's definitely something that I think no Democrat will hopefully. I mean, you never know with the Democrats, but I don't think they're ever going to hopefully never make that mistake again. So, yeah, I mean, some of these dynamics they pose particular problems for Pete Buttigieg and to some extent Elizabeth Warren. Though both candidates are in the top tier in Iowa, they're struggling to connect with black voters, the most critical voting bloc for Democrats, fueling a perception that they mainly appeal to liberal white elites. And I think that's just such an important thing, because if you look at Pete Buttigieg and especially Elizabeth Warren, we've seen them kind of get in interesting little squabbles recently. It's because they appeal for the same block of support. I think a myth at this point, the big election myth, is that Bernie and Warren, they're kind of competing for the same people. While they do probably have the closest policies, they're competing for coalitions. If you look at the demographics and the research on it, they're just completely different. They have a lot more. Warren does have a lot more support with the richer, whiter, more coastal crowd, as Bernie has a poor, more diverse, less educated crowd. And I think you got to be able to draw from multiple pools if you want to win. I think that's what Obama's was able to do. I think Bernie's able to do that, and Biden's able to do that probably the most effectively of the top quote unquote 4 candidates in this race.
Yeah, I would agree. That makes sense.
Yeah, and this is all fun to read, because I would love to get your opinion for a second on Mayor Pete here. I think people have listened to the show for at least a good period of time. Listen to the Spencer Walsh Radio Network, know that I am no Mayor Pete fan. A recent Quinnipiac poll showed that Buttigieg with less than 1% of support among black Democrats in South Carolina, where Warren had 8%. Another Quinnipiac poll released this last week said Buttigieg only had 2% support nationally among black voters, with Warren at 12%. Bernie had 13%. Yeah, what do you think is struggling? What do you think is behind the struggles of these Democrats, Pete Buttigieg and Elizabeth Warren specifically, to kind of reach out to black voters, if you had to say?
Well, I don't really know.
It is kind of a hard question. I'll give you that.
I don't really understand the thinking of black voters. It would help, I think, if I were black, maybe. But I aside from the fact that Biden was Obama's running mate, I don't understand. I mean, that certainly helps, and they were good friends and buddies and everything, and maybe that's why blacks like Biden. But beyond that, I'm not sure why they like him.
I think they get the sense that he's just the most electable guy, and especially I think more old black voters. I've heard at least, and again, this is not obviously the statement for all black voters, but I think it kind of applies where they are feeling a lot more we cannot have President Donald Trump again, no matter what. I don't care what happens. I'm not necessarily thrilled with Joe Biden, but I don't want to have Trump ever again. But their kids are more we need big revolutionary change, so we support Bernie Sanders.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Well, Warren and Buttigieg, I don't know why black voters don't like them. Maybe because they're too elitist or something. Maybe there's an issue with Buttigieg being gay. I'm not sure. It could be that Buttigieg just hasn't campaigned much I guess he's tried. I mean, he knows it's a problem with him. And I think he's done some campaign appearances at some black colleges. But yeah, I really don't know.
Yeah, I think it actually kind of comes from and there's no really way to determine this for sure. You can't go around and compile this with every Democratic primary registered black voter, but I think the way he handled the police department in South Bend was a big thing, especially after they killed, or one of the officers there shot an unarmed black man, and that kind of got around. The kind of infamous video of Pete Buttigieg saying, like, I'm not asking for your vote, to this black lady who's like, you're running for president, you expect our vote, you're not going to get it. Yeah, so that's definitely a interesting dynamic going on there. And I think that a lot of the stuff I've been hearing that suspiciously enough that that the worrying about black people not liking Pete Buttigieg because he's gay kind of stuff from a lot of Pete Buttigieg associated people. I think that narrative, I think actually from what I've heard, came from a focus group based on that, but I don't know if I've ever seen any real kind of concrete evidence to that fact. So I mean, I don't know. I don't think it's true. Don't really feel comfortable going there. But I think the thing is, it is a big and interesting race that still is hopefully going to narrow down soon. But there's a lot of stuff to go when it comes to that. I do want to switch gears from the primary election over here to the UK election across the pond. What was your reaction to some of the results this past Thursday in the UK election? Definitely a pretty tough one for the left wing.
Yeah, I was pretty devastating. I mean, it really proves, I think, that most of Britain wants Brexit. And it was really quite shocking. It wasn't really even that close, these elections. I don't know if it had to do with, Jeremy Corbyn or what it was, but it's amazing to me that a buffoon like Boris Johnson could garner so many votes, and his party, gained the upper hand as much as they did. So I was pretty shocked. I thought it was going to be a lot closer.
Yeah, the polls certainly did indicate that. I think if I had to kind of look at it, I'd say it was from really a number of factors, especially from the fact that the media was incredibly tough on Jeremy Corbyn. I've looked at some of the coverage there and some of the analysis that I think are really sure to come out in the future about this stuff. But I think it's very, very interesting to see that there is an interesting narrative, and of course to think that the Brexit, as you mentioned, the big issue in that election, not the issue that Jeremy Corbyn necessarily wanted to have in that election, because a lot of his party base, his party membership, they were for Remain, and a lot of his constituency, the quote-unquote Rust Belt of Britain, the Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania areas of Michigan, which is called there the Midlands, kind of the middle of the country, in the industrial north of England, they were much more pro-Brexit because they felt that they'd been screwed by the EU, and then that's a narrative that very successfully took hold during the original 2015 Brexit campaign. And that was a position that Jeremy Corbyn, he just never was able to stake out very clearly, because he would risk alienating a lot of his party either way. So that was a very interesting dynamic, and I think it's very interesting that also that we see former Vice President Joe Biden Thursday taking in a gathering of rich donors that the Labour Party's crushing defeat in the UK general election represents a warning sign that Democrats should not nominate a left-wing candidate in 2020. A narrative that progressives immediately condemned as highly misleading and pernicious. And here's the kind of the two sides on this. This is Joe Biden. Look what happens when the Labour Party moves so far to the left. It comes up with ideas that are not able to be contained within a rational basis quickly. And trying to compare those ideas and those platforms to America, when if you look at the political center in America and the political center in Great Britain, like, the political center in Great Britain is so far to the left than the political center here in America. Like, we have a long way to go before our left gets even close to being as left as Jeremy Corbyn's was. Personally, I got to be honest, I supported Jeremy